did well in school, and my parents were proud of me. And I went to high school, and because I was so shut down emotionally, um, I didn't cause a fuss for any of the high school teachers. I did well in my studies in high school, and they all thought I was very mature. And actually, I was just, as I say, just kind of psychologically shut down, so that by the time I reached grade 13, um, the internal pot was beginning to boil.
Hmm.
And I can't remember exactly what my symptoms were at that point in time, but it was enough that my parents recognized that there was an issue with me. And I was very anxious. I was depressed, crying, and I was still doing well in school, but emotionally, I was kind of a mess. Um, and so my parents took me to the doctor to find out what was wrong. And I was given a barium enema to see what was going on in my gut. And my mother took me on a big shopping trip up to Yorkdale Mall. And that was supposed to be a really big deal. You know, we lived 50 miles away, but Yorkdale Shopping Center was the center of high fashion in Toronto in those days.
Retail therapy at its finest.
Retail therapy. Yes, that's what my mom did for herself.
Yeah.
When she was unhappy, she went out and bought new clothes, new hats, new purses, new shoes, whatever. And so she applied that to me. Um, Nowhere, not me, not my parents, no one traced my upset back to the early uh, classroom and abuse. And I didn't either. I didn't know what was wrong. I just knew something was wrong,
Mhm.
but
What did you do
nobody
with
ever
that?
questioned me.
Sorry,
Pardon?
what did you do with that story then of, well, that part of your life when that happened? Was it still in your conscious memory? Was it something that was quite trivial after all? How did it sit in your mind?
I think it didn't. I think I just moved it out of consciousness
Right.
because I don't remember in high school ever telling anybody or thinking about it. I was just reacting. I just had all these psychological upsets and stomach upsets. Um, but no, I didn't ever go to anybody and say, I think this is what's wrong. I didn't know what was wrong.
I think that's when our
And that,
body's loudest, is when we don't have any words for what's happening. Then the
yes, yeah, I agree totally. Yeah. And it occurred again in university. I was okay in first year university. I had a roommate, I had made some friends, and I worked hard. But in second year, I was put into a room by myself, which was probably a mistake for me.
Mm.
And I had nightmares and felt my life was falling apart. I contemplated suicide, though not seriously, but I certainly thought about it. And but again, I didn't know what was wrong. So the counseling service at the university sent me to a counselor. Um, I related my problems to my father's drinking
Mm.
and to the bad relationship between my parents. Um, Again, I can't remember disclosing the sexual abuse or the school situation, even to that counselor. Um,
But there was some acknowledgement there that it wasn't that you were having just physical symptoms. There was now acknowledgement that you were going through a stress response.
right. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
And
a
they
little.
also sent me to the university medical service. Um, and they gave me some pretty powerful antipsychotics, which I quit after a week because
Good
that wasn't solving anything. That was just putting me to sleep for 14 hours a day.
goodness.
Yeah. So an inappropriate response to a student, a young person, because I would have been 19, having a lot of internal, um, well, as I say, nightmares and that sort of thing. So I can't say I got any effective help. Let's put it that way.
Did you feel a sense of failure and shame that you were having all of these symptoms, or
I definitely felt like a failure because my parents were investing a lot of money for me to go to university. A lot of weight was on my shoulders to do well. Um, my father went to university for about a year and a half, and then he returned home, quit university because of what they called nerves.
Mm,
So I think my father felt a real failure.
mm,
Um, and so it was down to me then to do well in university. And in fact, I did get my bachelor's degree. So I managed to kind of
mm,
scrape together enough. I felt like quitting actually in my third year, but I decided I'd put enough time in and my parents' money into this, so I better finish. And I'm glad I did.
yeah.
Um, yeah,
Pretty remarkable that you were able to do that in spite of severe physical symptoms and the
yeah,
stress of just the pressure, incredible pressure.
yeah, because I was struggling with the studies too by that time, and that had always been my mainstay, like in high school.
Mhm.
I at least I got really good marks. So
Something
it
you
was
could rely on.
exactly. And then when things started to fall apart in university, I was struggling to keep up with the work. Yeah. But
Yes.
as I say, I graduated and then I met my first husband,
Mhm. Now
which
we're really getting into legacy.
yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And he just thought my symptoms were weird. And because by the time I met him, I was having panic attacks and severe nervousness. My a new doctor sent me to a psychiatrist, which didn't do anything. I was sent to a psychiatrist for therapy, but it didn't concentrate on any of the issues I was going through. I'm not sure what what it was about. Um, and I think um, my husband, I think my husband just thought I was a bit of a basket case, so he had to take charge, which he did.
Mhm.
And he was a very dishonest person too. So when somebody's lying to you and they're really good at it, you don't know you're being lied to. So
How,
no,
what
so that
did you feel
was
like you were being cared for? Was somebody, did you feel looked
no.
after? No, you
Oh
knew that
no,
you
no,
were
no,
being
no.
controlled.
I was being criticized. And I really, that's a difficult part of my life to describe. Um, that's why I wrote the first book,
Mhm.
The Full Catastrophe.
Full catastrophe says it all.
Yeah, so I had two disastrous marriages, and finally, my first husband threatened me. If you don't move to Calgary with me, I will leave you and our 1-year-old child. So I really felt like, I mean, instead of using common sense, which I would now, I mean, if somebody says they're going to leave you and your 1-year-old child,
Mhm.
the marriage is done.
Mm.
But I thought it was my job to do what he wanted to maintain the marriage.
If only you were good enough, if you only said
If
and
I
did the
tried
right thing
harder,
all the time.
yeah, if I tried harder and did what he said, then, and of course, we got to Calgary, and 4 years later, the marriage was a complete and utter mess. And he left, and that was the end of the marriage.
And now you were in a city that wasn't even in your province.
I didn't know anybody when I got there. I did get a job after about a year and a half. I had a second son. Um, and there must have been something in the back of my mind that said, you better get out there and get a job because this marriage is
Hmm.
on the ropes.
Wow.
So I did do that, but it wasn't fair to my kids because at 2 and 4, they were in daycare and I was miserable and the marriage was falling apart. Yeah, it was a big mess, just a
Mm.
big mess. And I should have gone back to Ontario because I had a teacher's certificate. But I thought, well, no, I can't disrupt my kids any more than they
Mhm.
already are.
Right.
So,
No good options,
well, the
right?
good option would have been to go back to Ontario, stay with my parents until I got on my feet, get a teaching job. But I wasn't thinking clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, also, I think that that was your mother's brain too, thinking that the kids needed some stability. At least you could keep
Yeah,
the location the same, if nothing else. That's
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And they did have my ex-husband's parents close by, and
Mm.
they, I didn't realize how much they were undermining me.
Oh,
Um, but they loved the kids and they would relieve me of some of the responsibility on some weekends, which was good.
yeah.
So,
Yeah. So you made it through that era of being on your own with two kids.
right. And having suffered physical violence at the hand of my first husband. And I explain that in my first book, The Full Catastrophe, that when you have been, I mean, I had a concussion, I had my neck was put out of joint, my arm was pulled out of the socket. When you go through that kind of physical violence, you're not thinking carefully. Um, and
That's
so
just totally offline limbic. Like you must have been terrified.
I was terrified and I was in a post-traumatic stress that I didn't even recognize.
Mm.
And I was so much in denial that I actually went to the emergency department with my neck so sore I couldn't even move it. And this was like a year later. And they looked at me physically, but I never even told them that I'd been assaulted
Mhm.
because it was gone.
Oh,
I
yeah.
didn't recognize it. I didn't own it. I didn't own that I'd been assaulted. So I think one of the biggest legacies, I think, of child sexual abuse and parents not listening to you is when other people deny, I started to deny as well.
Absolutely.
I was
Absolutely.
shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was so convinced that I was just, you know, self-sabotaging, that I was just such a failure. And I was just looking for ways to destroy my life. And I didn't, and it was mixed with a sense of, I really don't want that man to have affected my life so profoundly. I don't want to
Mm,
have been so weak as to have been
yeah.
derailed by such a, I didn't want to put any more effort into thinking about him, going to counseling over what he had done. It was very mixed. On the one hand, it was him, it was his, I just didn't want him to be a part of my life.
I understand
That's a
that.
very
Yeah.
healthy thing in one
Yes.
sense.
Yeah.
but it was also not allowing me to tell the truth to myself about what had happened and how
Yeah.
devastating it was.
Well, there's something about us because we get through those bad events by putting up this shield almost that we don't recognize our own vulnerability.
Mhm.
And so we don't feel sorry in a good way
Mhm.
for that small child. I mean, a
Mhm.
9-year-old is small.
Mhm.
Um, so we don't have any empathy for her
That's
because
exactly it.
we weren't allowed to.
Yeah.
As I say, we had to put up this shield, we had to deny, we had to just get through every day. That was how it was for me.
For me too, it was also a feeling of I wanted to get as far from her as all of the adults in my life had managed to distance themselves from her. I wanted to be an adult who was also very far away from that little kid.
Right.
That's one of the saddest things that I think that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to recognize that helplessness
Hmm.
because how am I going to get through the rest of my life if I say I'm helpless?
Yes. I still have a great deal of trouble crying. I have friends who
Um,
cry easily, and
mhm,
I just envy that access they seem to have to the heart, comes up, tears come out. There's like a natural process there, whereas I can
mhm.
feel them held. They're held in there.
Yeah.
I don't know if that has been true for you, if you find that you have connection with yourself, that you could cry or feel what you feel and it's okay, or if you still struggle to feel what you feel.
Well, my father died in 2000, so 24 years ago. I have never cried for his death. And with my mother, I cried a year before she died when she was so incapacitated that she just wasn't my mother anymore. So I was able to cry at her inability to live.
Mm.
But when she died, I didn't cry. And I didn't cry for my father either.
Mhm.
So, but interestingly, somebody asked me in my presentation the other day, this was the only man in the audience. And he said to me, what was the youngest case of child molestation that you have heard of? And I knew I had to answer him honestly because I think he'd been doing some reading and I don't know what his background was.
Mm.
And as I said the words 3 weeks,
Mm.
I teared up and I almost couldn't get the words out because it's so horrific. And people really got it. There were these gasps in the audience. So I guess what I would say is I have a lot of empathy for other people who have gone through this, but I still don't have a lot of empathy for myself. It's still blocked in some way.